All right, listen, there's so much going on. We got to check into security and strategy and all of that tonight.
The Dan York State of Mind program is brought to you in part by Lookout Rhode Island and Takeo Comfort Solutions.
Oh, look, you know, the world turns on an axis. There's always something going on, and sometimes I start this program in a cliche fashion. But it's hard to keep up. Welcome in on this Thursday evening, Professor Marc Genest from the Naval War College, who speaks for himself, but who teaches, you know, smart people, smart things down there, is my guest tonight. We're a little light on the production side due to some personnel stuff today, but it gives us a chance to kind of just shoot the breeze about what's going on here. And rather than just jumping on Charlottesville, you know, Marc's an old political scientist as well, so I'm sure he's got some thoughts on this, because there might be a conversation about local terrorism as well in all of that. We ought to remind ourselves that we've had this thing going on with this place called North Korea. Here's one of the latest headlines on that. Well, that's an old one, but it kind of gets to the point. And so we bring Marc in to talk about that first. It almost feels, welcome again, nice to have you. It's always a pleasure and a service to the viewers to have your point of view. You know, the way the news cycle is moving so fast, and, you know, right now, I don't even want to comment too terribly much on what's happening in Spain, in Barcelona. Last check, there was, you know, more than a dozen lives lost and another couple of dozen injured, and by the time you're watching the show, that tally probably is going to be higher. That's, you know, front and center in the news cycle. Donald Trump's commentary about Charlottesville and the actual rally events have been sucking the life out of the news cycle, but it seems like, oh, so long ago, but only last week, that we were still in this North Korean situation, right? So let's go to that first. Has that been resolved in any sort of way, with Kim Jong-un kind of just walking away the threat to Guam quietly here?
Well, the North Korea situation hasn't been resolved since 1953.
Duh, right?
So
Dumb question. I mean,
well, no, because
do we have a moment
problem.
of less contention right now?
Potentially, we do. The rhetoric has been ratcheted back just a little bit, so everyone can breathe a little easier. But this tension between the United States and North Korea over their nuclear weapons programs is likely to continue because, as we said before, North is using its nuclear weapons program to not only prop up the regime, but also to blackmail the West, and they've been doing this for 30 years. So they're not about to change their policies overnight on this.
Are we in a space and time where the milk is spilt on North Korea's A, goal for nuclear weaponry, and B, its ascertainment of some of the technology already, and then we've got to treat them and welcome them to the world of nuclear powers and then ask them to behave accordingly? Is that where we need to be? Because it seems to me that we're still making as an entree into relieving sanctions that they do away with their nuclear program, and it seems to me that that's a non-starter. Am I missing something?
No, you're not. They have had nuclear weapons for a few years now, and now they're getting the capability to put them on intercontinental ballistic missiles that can potentially reach the west coast of the United States. So that's why the crisis has become even more emotional for the United States, because for the first time they can actually reach us. And they've done so with the help of Iran, accompanying the Ukraine, the Chinese, and the Russians. So this is a long-standing problem that countries have found it in their interest to either sell or give some of the technology to North Korea in order to continue to poke the United States just bit by bit. That's been the Chinese policy and the Russian policy now for decades. And we're paying the price for it now.
Well, do the Chinese feel like they have a responsibility now to unpoke this bear and try to work the North Koreans back into a more calm status?
Yes, they've had their cake and ate it too,
right,
for so long now.
Do they get it?
That Kim Jong-un,
you just got back from China.
Right.
You've had a lot of insight into this.
They are very concerned with him. They want him to ratchet down the rhetoric. They like him because he's a buffer between South Korea and China and the West and China, so they can use him. There's an old line from Nikita Khrushchev that said, "Berlin is the testicles of the West, and whenever I want to gain their attention, I squeeze it a little bit." Well, that was North Korea's role for the Chinese. Whenever they want to ratchet it up, they can just kind of push Kim Jong-un a bit. But now he's gone a bit too far, and now it can actually threaten the United States. And Trump now is saying, okay, in response to that, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce our anti-missile defenses into South Korea and Japan. We're even going to talk about perhaps renuclearizing by bringing intermediate range nuclear forces into that region again. No one wants that, but Trump, by threatening to do so, has finally got China's attention.
You think he's been effective?
He's been more effective than the last couple of administrations. Now, the bar is low there, but he has been somewhat effective, particularly in gaining the Chinese attention on this matter.
Is it him?
I think there's an element that people don't know what Trump will do, that maybe he will, when push comes to shove, use military force. So he does have that element of, do we understand what he will actually do if push comes to shove? And that helps in negotiations. The problem is that it can also make the situation more dangerous.
I thought when he went fire and fury, my immediate reaction is, oh gosh. And I said so here. I thought the tone and the actual word usage was highly irresponsible. In the old adage of the art of war, it's obviously a simplification. When you're weak, act strong. When you're strong, act weak. He was acting strong, which I think made us look weak in a sense. I mean, nobody in this world doesn't know that we can take North Korea out in one fell swoop. It's what the peripheral damage is going to be in that region in the world that nobody wants to think about, including South Korea, Japan, and the whole thing. I just don't understand the rhetorical hyperbole, and I don't understand how that benefits anybody.
Okay, there is a logic to what he did.
Okay.
I would prefer less colorful language, but think about this. In 1993, Bill Clinton, at the DMZ, the line that separates the North and the South, said that if North Korea used nuclear weapons or attacked or threatened to do so, the United States will make North Korea cease to exist. So that was the same kind of threat that didn't garner the kind of attention that Trump did just a couple of weeks ago.
Why do you think that is?
Well, because everyone understood that Bill Clinton was a reasonable, rational actor. There are some questions about whether or not Trump is. So the emotional response was much more dramatic. However, in deterrence theory, it's a psychological doctrine that states your enemy must be aware that in the event of nuclear war, there are no winners, there are only losers. And the more that they understand that, the more they realize that it's never cost-benefit analysis that says using nuclear weapons is worth it. So it's a suicide pact. And the great thing about Kim Jong-un, one of the only great things, is he may be an evil man, but he's not an irrational man. He's not suicidal. So reminding him of the consequences of a potential nuclear exchange does make it for a more robust deterrent. And that is the logic behind his statements.
We define him as evil, but saying why and how.
Well, because the why is he's clearly evil. He's killed his uncle, he's killed his half-brother, he's killed thousands of his own people. It's a regime based on depressing your population, literally keeping your population impoverished as you put 90% of your resources into the military. And the reason you do so is to retain your power and your control over the government. So this is a regime that does not care about the well-being of its own people.
Period.
Period. And it's been like that for generations.
Yet,
because he's concerned with survival, he's not irrational. He's not going to do something that will put his regime on death ground. So unless he positively has to and he's being invaded, it's very unlikely he would use nuclear weapons.
Yeah, I've heard many analysts say that he is acting out in a much more aggressive way than his father would have.
Yes.
And have we figured out why that is?
Well, I'm going to put it in broader context. Every couple of years, even his father would play the game of a missile test, a nuclear test. Remember, Kim Jong-un inherited nuclear weapons.
Right.
So his father was behind the program to begin with, and it was a very, very critical and controversial thing that he did. So it was a pattern of every couple of years, you'd blackmail the West would give you more foreign aid, you'd behave yourself, and then you'd cheat a little. So Kim Jong-un is not radically different from his father at all. He may use more colorful language, but if you go back and read some of the transcripts of 10 years ago, it's not that radically different. It's the press's interpretation of Kim Jong-un that is different.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk about whether the president is the stable force in this conversation. A lot of people are worried that he's not. Stay with us. Welcome back again. Marc Genest is the professor at the Naval War College, speaks for himself in these conversations. The big question, I think, when it comes to the North Korean tussle that we've been talking about is whether Donald Trump is the guy to rely on. You know, the fire and fury comment. I'm guessing you think the general strategy is correct. You may have he may have chosen better language. Is that more or less your assessment?
Yes, because he's willing to use all the tools of government power, economic, diplomatic, and military.
I think a lot of us who have at least paid a little bit of attention to his appointments feel pretty good about the team that he has around him. We've talked about that on a number of occasions. You still do.
Sure.
Push comes to shove, though, especially when you see him in this Charlottesville episode, which we'll get into in a second, and you get to see him raw in the thinking process, you know, vis-a-vis that press conference that he had. And then you translate to this stuff. I have a lot of worry about the way he actually processes and goes about making decisions. Should we be concerned about that and its applicability toward North Korea or any other nuclear power?
Well, I think the good thing about Trump is that he has a tremendous amount of respect for the military. And he surrounded himself with very top-notch military leaders. I mean, you can't get any better than Kelly and Mattis and McMaster. These are three dedicated Americans, very smart. And Kelly is trying to handle...
He's trying to run the office.
But I think between the three of them, they can steer President Trump in the right direction.
At the end of the day, do we ever get into a situation where he's got to make a call and all three of those guys are staring at him hoping he does the right thing?
It's always possible when you're President of the United States and Commander-in-Chief that a crisis will occur and it's going to be up to the Commander-in-Chief to make the final decision. I, however, have more faith that his advisors, who are very rational, very cool, very calm, will steer him in the right direction.
You don't think we'll get to that, for lack of a better term, cliche visual in everybody's head about ordering the button to be pushed? That's not where we are right here. You don't think Kim Jong-un is in a place where he'll push a button either?
No.
You threaten to send a missile Guam's way, and look at all the drawings in the world, send pictures out about him, but not going to go there.
Not unless he's on death row, not unless somebody invades them or attempts to kill him. And this is why China's role is so critical. It's very important to China to be a positive actor. And Henry Kissinger wrote an article about a week ago saying what needs to be done is the United States has to together, Trump and Xi have to get together and create a common set of aims, announce them together, and then together work to get Kim Jong-un to accept that. And if the United States and China work in coordination, that is the best opportunity we have to get Kim Jong-un to ratchet down his nuclear program.
Well, is there a level of, I don't know, nuclear competence that we can allow North Korea to have? Because it seems like they're just going to keep exhausting resources to continue to perpetuate it. Is there a threshold of welcome to the club that they'd accept, or will they continue to try to build and chase our nuclear capability, or Russia's or China's? And obviously he's not going to be able to do that. Well,
I think to a degree it's already the status quo. They already have nuclear capability, and they already have at least medium-range missiles.
Right now.
Yeah, they have medium-range missiles. That's what they've been testing. So theoretically, yes, they could reach Japan. They could reach countries in the region, certainly South Korea. So they already have that capability.
Right. But that's the JV comparative to what we can do.
Oh, it always will be. I mean,
That's
we
my
have a
point.
massive
Is there,
nuclear
so is there a threshold where, you know, we're watching this missile testing and this breastfeeding about being able to hit continental United States? Nobody believes that, you know, out of the atmosphere, into the atmosphere, that they've got a missile that can carry a nuclear, blah, blah, blah. And of course, the judgment was years away. Now it could be months away. Who knows? I just trying to figure out how in the heck name you can actually measure, guide, and then call it a draw. You know, will they be in a position where they're finally feeling like they've done enough in their nuclear capacity?
Well, if you look at it in terms of they need this to blackmail the West to give them foreign aid, then they'll never do enough, because once they're ignored and once the foreign aid begins to dry up, they can do something provocative to get you to give more aid. So one of the things that you can do is try to demonstrate to the North that, look, we're not going to invade you. Let's have a final treaty to end the Korean War officially. So it's not just a ceasefire now, it's a true peace agreement. That might help. Also, maybe continuing foreign aid. But some of the problems here is, and this hasn't reached the press because they've been focused on less consequential issues, is once the North Koreans are able to deliver a missile into the stratosphere, they can explode it and it can create an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, that can take out all of the communications in that area. That's the real danger. Even if they can't reach the continental U.S., just by being in the stratosphere and then releasing an EMP, it can literally shut down the American economy and the global economy, or the regional economy. That is something that is extraordinarily frightening, and yet
because it renders inoperative what?
Communication, satellites, satellite communication, all kinds of electronic communications.
Temporary hit or full time?
It depends on the pulse, it depends on the size, and it depends on where it is set off.
Is that what's in their mind?
There is some indication that that is exactly what's on their mind.
Does this administration see that?
Yes, which is one of the reasons why we are working so much on getting our Aegis and our THAAD, which are both anti-missile defense systems.
So they fire, can we blow it down?
One would hope. They work, but not as well as they should work. So you have to do layered defenses. You have to have layered defense in South Korea, in the ocean surrounding the peninsula, and then in Guam, and then in Alaska, and all areas that you can possibly hit the missile at each stage. The best time to hit it is at the earliest stages. It's very complicated.
And very troubling.
Very, very troubling. And not enough attention has been brought on the technology and what it can potentially do, because it's very frightening. And that's why you have a lot of military experts very concerned with this particular issue.
Why aren't they talking a lot about it? Just the worry factor?
A lot has been written about it in defense manuals and defense journals that I read. It hasn't made it out to the mainstream press because, and forgive me, you're not part of the mainstream press, they're not technologically savvy enough, nor do I think serious enough.
You can throw me in the middle of that. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So, you know, it's, present company included. I mean, it'll be interesting to see whether the information flow begins to get a little heavier on that particular worry, and how that affects the constituents' confidence in this administration. When we come back, the stuff that's happened, quick thought from Marc on that. Stay with us. All right, so listen, the conversation that we're having about Charlottesville, and you know, the radio lines have been full all week, and I'm sure will continue to be, is disturbing on a security basis as well. I mean, you have been really smart about terrorism discussions here. What we're experiencing in Barcelona right now, again, I don't have the details because we tape early in the afternoon, but that's another horror show. The new technique is to ram motor vehicles into people. Brilliant. What's it tell us about what's happening? And even in Charlottesville, this knucklehead decides that he's going to take his car and ram into the group. I mean, what up?
In a way, it's brilliant because it's so difficult to stop, right? The Zawahiri, the leader of Al-Qaeda, as well as Baghdadi when he was alive, said, go and attack the West, use knives, use cars, use anything you can. And the reason they want to do that is because, one, you can do a lot of damage, and two, it's impossible to stop this. They're just using automobiles. So there's no way that we can really stop that. That's what makes it so effective, because terrorism works when an attack on civilians can't be predicted when, where, and how.
Yet it seems to me, I don't know about this particular case, because again, early in the day for us, it seems to me that just about every even motor vehicle massacre that we've been talking about here, authorities, the individual driver was known to authorities. In other words, the behavior has not become, now this guy in Charlottesville, I don't know. Do you consider that a terrorist act? I mean,
yes,
the behavior reflects it,
sure.
but it's for different terror reasons.
Right.
It's the content and the philosophy is different, but the manual remains the same. That's a problem, right? That's a disease in free society that we have to worry about. But it seems that some of the major hits, authorities knew who these people were.
Sure, but you have that tension between civil liberties and security. And just because people are alerted, officials are alerted that these people are radical or have a potential threat, doesn't mean that you have enough capability to follow them 24/7.
Are we stopping these things quietly?
Oh, we are stopping so much quietly, particularly in New York and the East Coast, where a lot of the focus has been on for terrorists. The
Guys that have the same
work,
ideas about
right.
taking cars into places. And
the remarkable work of Homeland Security is just astonishing. It really is. However, you can't stop 100% of the time.
What is this white supremacist thing and the tension and the multiple rallies that we're going to see in the near future do to this conversation?
The more attention radicals get, the more they're able to recruit
they're radical
for
about.
whatever they are. So unfortunately, we have a problem with the 24/7 news agenda, where you have to always have something on the news, and this attracts media attention. Remember, terrorism is a violence that's inconsequential on in the national level unless it's covered. If it's covered, then it's like
Tree
a force
falls in the
multiplier.
wood, no one there to hear it.
Exactly.
Doesn't make any noise.
Right. So the more attention that media gives it, the more marketing tool it is.
And so when I suggest that the left, for lack of a better term, I hate these right-left notes, but turning the other cheek rather than developing antifas is the best medicine
Yes.
for all of this.
Yes.
Yet, how can one expect people to turn away from a message of hatred that way? It's very difficult to suggest we should. The president's rhetoric this week in advancing the cause.
No, he's not. I mean, look, he did condemn outright the Nazis. Did he do it enough to satisfy most people? No. Did he do it well? Did he mix his messages? Yes, he did.
There's not equitable blame.
No, there isn't.
And he's trying to establish that, which is dangerous. What's your prediction? We only have half a minute here. Is he going to make this thing? Is he going to finish out this term? Is there a 25th Amendment riding out there somewhere?
I don't think there's going to be enough evidence to demonstrate that he is not, intellectually or emotionally capable of carrying out the duties of the President of the United States. We've had, remember, Woodrow Wilson had a series of strokes, and his wife ran the country for a year or so.
We're a little smarter than we were back then, but anyway, it's too big a question and too little time. Thanks for all the info, though. Marc, terrific. Final word and we can back. Stay with us. Tomorrow night, we'll have a different view on the rising electric rates with National Grid and what you can do about it and how the manufacturers in our state feel about that. That's tomorrow night on Dan York's State of Mind. See you on the radio tomorrow at 3. Thanks for watching. Good night.